If there's one thing I used to believe about my marriage, it's that problems, real ones, announce themselves. You argue. You drift apart. Something changes in a way you can point to. What I didn't expect was how quietly things could fall apart. Lena and I have been married long enough to settle into a rhythm that felt permanent. Not exciting, not new, but stable. Predictable in a way that people either find comforting or suffocating. I found it comforting. I'm not so sure anymore. It started the way these things usually do. Small changes that didn't seem worth questioning. She became more particular about her schedule. Certain days were suddenly busy, without much explanation. She started taking calls outside, even in bad weather. Messages would light up her phone late at night, and she'd tilt the screen just slightly away from me. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point at and say, this is it. Just enough to notice. Not enough to confront. I told myself the same thing people always do. It's probably nothing. Work stress. Friends. Life. You can explain almost anything if you want to. And I wanted to. The house became the center of our conversations. Not emotionally, practically. We have been talking about renovating for years. The kitchen especially. Outdated cabinets, worn countertops, a layout that never quite worked. It was one of those shared someday plans that couples hold onto as proof that there's still a future ahead. Let's finally do it, Lena said one evening, scrolling through photos of modern interiors. Start fresh. Change things up. I remember thinking that was a good sign. People don't invest in something they're planning to leave. So we started looking for contractors, recommendations from friends, online reviews, portfolios. It became a project, something we could work on together. Or at least, that's how it felt at first. The name came from her. I know someone, she said casually one afternoon. He's done work for a colleague of mine. Supposedly really good. I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? A few days later, he came by to look at the place. Marco. That's how he introduced himself. Firm handshake, easy confidence. The kind of person who knows how to walk into someone else's home and immediately make himself comfortable without overstepping. We did the usual walkthrough. Kitchen, living room, the areas we want to change. He asked the right questions, took measurements, made suggestions that actually made sense. Professional, capable, normal. Lena stayed close during the whole thing. At first, I thought it was just interest. This was her project too, after all. But looking back, there was something else. A kind of awareness. Not obvious, just slightly off. The way they avoided direct eye contact for too long. Or held it a second too long when they did. The way their conversations occasionally drifted just outside the boundaries of what we were discussing. Small things. Easy to miss. Easier to ignore. We hired him. It felt like a good decision. Fair price. Solid plan. Timeline that worked. Everything lined up. The work started the following week. And with it, a new routine. Marco was there most days. Early mornings, sometimes staying into the evening, depending on what needed to get done. I worked from home part of the time, so I saw a lot of it. At first, it was exactly what you'd expect. Noise, dust, progress, cabinets coming down, walls being opened up. The slow transformation of something old into something new. Lena, on the other hand, became more present. She'd linger in the kitchen longer than necessary. Offer coffee. Ask questions she didn't really need answers to. Again, nothing inappropriate. Nothing you could call out, but enough to register. The first real crack didn't come from something I saw. It came from something I heard. I had stepped out to take a call in the hallway. Work-related. Routine. When I came back, I heard voices from the kitchen. Lena's. And Marco's. Closer than they needed to be. I stopped. Not intentionally. Just paused. You shouldn't be here this much, Lena was saying. Her voice was low. Not tense. Careful. I'm working, he replied. Light. Almost amused. That's not what I mean. A pause. Then quieter. This is risky. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Because suddenly, everything I'd been ignoring started to rearrange itself. Relax, he said. He has no idea. There are moments where your brain tries to reject what it's hearing, to reinterpret it, to soften it into something less destructive. This wasn't one of those moments, because there was no softer version of that sentence. I stepped back before they could see me. moved quietly down the hall, gave him time to reset whatever had just slipped out of place. When I walked back into the kitchen a minute later, everything looked normal. Too normal. Lena stood by the counter, scrolling through her phone. Marco was reviewing something on a tablet. They barely reacted to my presence. "How's it going?" I asked. My voice sounded steady, even to me. "Good," Marco said. "Making progress." Lena nodded without looking up. "Yeah, it's coming together." And just like that, the moment disappeared. On the surface. But something had shifted. Completely. That night, I didn't bring it up. Didn't confront her. Because I already knew. Not everything. But enough. Instead, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. The next few days confirmed it. Not through anything obvious, but through patterns. Timing. Glances. Silences that lasted a fraction too long. Then came the phone. Lena had left it on the couch while she was in the shower. It lit up. A message. From Marco. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. Because I already knew what I was going to find. The same way you know the ending of a story before you finish reading it. Still, I opened it. The thread wasn't new. It went back weeks. Months. Before the renovation. Before he ever stepped into our house. Photos. Messages. Plans. And just like that, everything connected. The contractor. The recommendation. The sudden urgency to renovate. This wasn't coincidence. It was design. I set the phone down carefully. Exactly where I'd found it. In the bedroom, the shower turned off. Water stopped running. Normal sounds. Ordinary. I sat there in the quiet, staring at nothing. Feeling something settle into place. Not shock. Not even anger. Not yet. Clarity. They hadn't just crossed a line. They had built something parallel to my life. Right inside it. And the house, the one we were renovating together, was just part of the cover. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Because in that moment, one thought became impossible to ignore. If he could walk into my house like that, if she could stand next to me and pretend none of it existed, then whatever came next wouldn't be accidental. It would be deliberate. I didn't confront them. That's what most people expect. The immediate explosion, the shouting, the demand for answers that can't possibly fix anything. It would have been justified, maybe even necessary, in a different version of this story. But that version requires uncertainty, and I didn't have any left. By the time I saw those messages, everything had already aligned. The conversations I overheard, the timing, the way Lena had brought him into our home like it was the most natural decision in the world. There wasn't a question to ask, only a reality to deal with. So I stayed quiet, not out of weakness, out of control. The next morning, nothing changed, at least not on the surface. Marco showed up at the same time, tools in hand, calm, professional, like he belonged there. Lena greeted him the same way she always did. Casual, familiar, just enough warmth to pass as polite. I watched it all unfold from the same place I had been standing in for weeks. Only now, I understood what I was looking at. There's something unsettling about seeing the truth clearly after missing it for so long. Not because it hurts more, but because it feels obvious, like the signs were always there, just waiting for you to stop ignoring them. I started noticing everything. The way their conversations shifted when I entered the room. The pauses, the recalibrations, the silent agreements happening in fractions of a second. It wasn't sloppy. It was practiced. And that's when the anger finally showed up. Not explosive, not loud, just precise. Because this wasn't just betrayal. It was access. He was in my house. Every day, walking through rooms we had built a life in. Touching walls, making changes, inserting himself into something that wasn't his. And she had made that possible. That detail mattered more than anything else. I didn't act on it immediately. Instead, I let things continue. Not indefinitely, just long enough. The renovation moved forward. Cabinets replaced. Flooring redone. The space slowly transforming into something new. On the surface, it looked like progress. But underneath, it felt like something else entirely. A performance. One I had unknowingly funded. That thought stayed with me. Long enough to turn into something sharper. If this whole situation existed because of access, then access was the one thing I could control. The idea didn't arrive all at once. It built gradually, piece by piece. At first, it was simple. End it. Fire him. Remove him from the house, from the situation. But the more I thought about it, the less satisfying that felt. Not because I wanted something dramatic, but because a quiet ending wouldn't match what had been done. They hadn't been quiet. Not really. They had been careful, calculated, confident enough to believe it would never be seen. That confidence stayed with me. Because once you understand that someone thinks they're safe, you understand exactly where they're most vulnerable. I started thinking about timing, not emotionally, logistically. When was he most comfortable? When was the situation most visible? When would the shift hit hardest? Not just for him, but for her too. The answer was obvious. Not in private, in the middle of everything. Workdays were predictable, but there were moments when the house wasn't just ours. Deliveries, inspectors, occasional subcontractors cycling through to handle different parts of the job. Brief windows where the space felt less controlled, less contained. That's where the idea settled. Not confrontation, not a scene, just removal, done in a way that couldn't be ignored or rewritten later. I didn't need to expose everything. I didn't need to explain. The truth was already clear to me. What mattered was shifting the balance. The next few days, I watched more carefully. Not for confirmation, for opportunity. It came on a Thursday. There were 2 other people in the house that morning. A delivery team dropping off materials. Another worker scheduled to handle electrical adjustments. Nothing unusual, just enough movement to make the space feel less private. Marco was in the kitchen, reviewing something on his tablet. Lena stood nearby, talking to him in a low voice. Close. Too close. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching, not reacting. This was it. I walked in slowly. No rush. No hesitation. Marco, I said. He looked up immediately. Professional reflex. Yeah. I held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. Long enough for something to register. Not understanding. Not yet. But awareness. We're done here. He blinked. Confused. What do you mean? I mean you're not working here anymore, I said. My voice stayed even. Calm. Lena turned toward me sharply. What are you talking about? There it was. The first crack. I'm talking about ending the contract, I replied, still looking at him. Effective immediately. The room shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. The other workers slowed. Not stopping completely. Just paying attention. Marco straightened slightly, trying to regain control of the situation. You can't just. There's a process, he said. We got agreements in place. You can't terminate like this without. I can, I interrupted. Still calm. That's exactly what I'm doing. Lena stepped forward. This doesn't make any sense, she said, her voice tight. Where is this coming from? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since all of this started. You already know, I said. That was it. No explanation. No accusation. Just recognition. Something in her expression changed. Not completely, but enough. Marco glanced between us, trying to read the situation, trying to figure out how much I knew. You're making a mistake, he said. More carefully now. Less confident. Maybe, I replied. Then, after a pause. But not this time. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Pack your things, I said. Whatever's yours, take it with you today. He didn't move immediately. Neither did she, because in that moment, the structure they had been operating inside, the one built on assumption, on secrecy, on control, was gone, and there was nothing left to hold it up. I stepped back toward the hallway, giving space, not out of courtesy, but because I didn't need to stay there anymore. Behind me, I could hear movement, muted voices, tension finally surfacing where it had been carefully contained before. I didn't go back into the kitchen. Didn't need to, because whatever happened next wouldn't be hidden anymore. The house didn't go quiet right away. That would have been too clean. Instead, everything continued, but differently. The same footsteps, the same low voices, the same movement of tools and materials, just strained now. Like a conversation that had gone on too long and couldn't recover its original tone. I stayed in the hallway for a few minutes after stepping away, not listening for specifics, just letting the weight of what I'd done settle into the space. Voices carried from the kitchen, lower than before, tighter, not the casual, controlled exchanges I had grown used to overhearing, but something more urgent, more real. "You need to leave," Lena said. Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It was clipped, controlled in a different way. "I'm not just walking out like this," Marco replied. "There's a contract. Theirs. Just go," she cut in. No hesitation. No softness. That shift caught my attention. Not because of what she said, but because of how quickly she adjusted. A few days ago, they had been aligned. Careful. Coordinated. Now, with the structure exposed, even partially, that alignment was gone. Replaced by self-preservation. I walked back into the living room as Marco came down the hallway. Tool bag in one hand. Jacket thrown over his shoulder. He didn't look at me at first. Then he did. There was something different in his expression now. Not confidence. Not even frustration. Calculation. "This isn't over," he said. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. More like a reflex. Something people say when they don't have control but aren't ready to admit it. I didn't respond. Because there wasn't anything to respond to. He waited a second longer, like he expected something back. An argument. A reaction. Anything that would re-establish some kind of balance. When it didn't come, he nodded once. Short. Sharp. Then walked out. The door closed behind him with a heavier sound than usual. Not slammed. Just final. For the first time since that morning, the house actually went quiet. Lena didn't come out right away. I could hear her moving in the kitchen, slower now. Not working. Not organizing. Just existing in the space. Processing. When she finally stepped into the living room, she looked different. Not visibly shaken. Not emotional in any obvious way. But the control, the precise, measured composure she usually carried, had shifted. "What was that?" she asked. Not loudly. Not aggressively. But directly. I leaned back slightly in the chair. "That was me ending something that shouldn't have started," I said. Her jaw tightened. "That's not an explanation. It's enough of one." She stared at me for a moment. Longer than usual. Like she was trying to decide which version of this conversation to have. "You embarrassed him," she said finally. The choice was interesting. Not "you're wrong." Not "you misunderstood." That. I let out a small breath. "Is that the part you're focused on?" Her expression hardened slightly. "You didn't have to do it like that." There it was. Not denial. Not even justification. Just criticism of the method. I nodded once. "You're right," I said. I didn't have to. That caught her off guard. Just for a second. "But I did," I added. Silence. Not the kind that invites resolution. The kind that confirms it isn't coming. She crossed her arms, shifting her weight slightly. "What exactly do you think this solves?" she asked. That question had been coming from the moment this started. Not just from her. From me. "Nothing," I said. Honest. Simple. She frowned. "Then why?" I considered that. Because the answer mattered. Not to fix anything, but to define it. "Because you brought it into this house," I said. My voice stayed calm. "Even. You made it part of something we were supposed to be building together." Her eyes flickered. Just slightly. "That's not," she started. Then stopped. Because there wasn't a clean way to finish that sentence. "You could have done whatever you wanted outside of this," I continued. Still wrong. Still what it is. But separate. A pause. This wasn't separate. The words landed. Not dramatically. But enough. For a moment, she didn't respond. Didn't argue. Didn't deflect. Then she looked away. Just briefly. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said. That sentence again. A different version of the same idea. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because of how consistent it was. "There's no version of this where it works," I said. She didn't argue with that. The rest of the day passed quietly. Not peacefully, just without conflict. The other workers finished what they could and left early. No one asked questions, but they didn't need to. Situations like that explain themselves without details. By evening, the house felt different. Not because of what had changed physically, but because of what had been removed. The renovation stopped. Not officially. Not with paperwork or decisions. Just practically. Without him there, everything paused. And in that pause, the reality of everything else started to settle in. We didn't talk much that night. There wasn't anything left to say that hadn't already been made clear. The next few days moved quickly. Not emotionally. Logistically. She made calls. Spoke to someone, lawyer, most likely. Spent more time out of the house. less time pretending anything was normal. I did the same. At some point, the word divorce entered the conversation. Not dramatically, not as a threat, just as the next step. And like everything else at that stage, it felt less like a decision and more like an acknowledgement. The house stayed unfinished, partially renovated, half old, half new, a space caught between what it had been and what it was supposed to become. It felt appropriate. Epilogue. People assume moments like that, the confrontation, the public ending, are about humiliation, about getting even, about making the other person feel something equal to what you felt. That wasn't it. Not really. Firing him in front of other people didn't fix anything. It didn't undo what had happened. It didn't restore anything that mattered. What it did was simpler than that. It removed the illusion, the idea that something like that could exist quietly, comfortably, inside a shared life without consequence. Once it was out in the open, even partially, it couldn't go back to what it was. For them, for her, for me. And maybe that was the only real outcome there ever was. Not revenge, not justice, just exposure. The rest? That's what you carry forward and figure out how to live with.